Thank you, everyone, for being here. And I was flattered when the Minnesota Watercolor Society asked me to come and demo my batik process. Just was really honored to do that. I first learned about the batik process when I took a class at the Madeline Island School of Art. I took a workshop with Kathy George. And if you Google Kathy George, it's Kathie and then George. She is an awesome batik watercolorist, and that's primarily a lot of what she does. But I fell in love with the batik process. She was just an excellent teacher. So you see people that are in person here, you'll see some of my pieces along the side here. I also have a document that I handed out that shows different steps of the process and also the supplies that are used in the process. So does some people need a handout? If they do, I've got some extra ones here. Yes.
Is it possible for those of us that
Carol's going to stop periodically and take questions. All right. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about the supplies that you need for the batik process, and then we'll get into it. The first thing is brushes. And you don't want to use your normal watercolor brushes like you use for painting when you're not doing batik, because you're going to ultimately get wax in your brushes. Also, I have a separate palette that I use because you're going to get wax in the palette colors. So I just use, like, here's my watercolor brushes that I'm going to be using tonight, or some of them. Just your basic watercolor brushes. But these are ones I only use for batik painting. Then I've also got my wax brushes, which are used for the wax. And those are only used for the wax application in my batik paintings. They're not used for painting. So keep those brushes separate if you're going to do this. Also, rice paper. So those of you that have the handout, there's a little example of the rice paper that I use to actually paint. There's a smooth side to the rice paper and there's a rough side. It's called Kanwashi rice paper. You can buy it at Dick Blick. It comes in big sheets like watercolor paper sheets. It's about $10 for a sheet. And then you can also, of course, order it online like at Amazon. There are other kinds of rice paper besides the Kanwashi, which I do want to try at some point, but the Kanwashi is the one that I've been using the most. Wax glue pot. You're going to be melting wax in the process and applying it to the paper. I have this little melting pot here. What it is you can get it on Amazon. You also can get it through letterseals.com. It's about $12. This is what I use to melt my wax. You plug it in and it's electric. It'll automatically start heating. I take a little can, like a cat food can from food, and I actually put it in on top of the heater here. And the reason is it just keeps it nice and clean instead of trying to do your wax right in where you're actually heating it there. Just a lot cleaner and easier to manage that way. So that's what that is. And I've already got my wax heating here. You have to be really careful because this wax gets very, very hot. It can get up to 225 degrees. So you just want to make sure that you don't have any little kids around or someone that's going to dump the wax on them. The other thing, what else was I going to say about the wax? You don't want it to be steaming. If it starts to steam and start like it feels like it's burning or smells like it's burning, then it means that your temperature is too hot. But the reason I like these little melters is because they don't get beyond the temperature that you should have the wax at. So you don't have to worry about it. Then you have your permanent pens. And these are the Pigma Micron waterproof archival pens. This is what I use to put my drawing on the rice paper. The reason I do that is because you want something that you're going to be able to see your drawing to be able to paint on, and it's waterproof, so it's not going to smear. So I've got I got 2 different pens. They come in different thicknesses so that your drawing could be a real fine line. It can also be a really thick line. Then just standard wax paper, and I'll show you how that's used, is part of the process. And paraffin wax. So wherever you can get canning supplies, you get the canning or the paraffin wax. So it comes in a box like this. They're pretty long chunks. I actually break them up into the size of an ice cube. So here's my little baggie of ice cube wax chips. I put it in the melter there, and it's just enough to fill the can. And then black construction paper, I'll talk about that in the process, show you how to use that. Newspapers and an iron and Kleenex and paper towels. So those are the supplies. Any questions yet? Yes. Oh, sorry. Good question. I'm not sure. That's a very good question. I've only used this wax. I would think beeswax might work. I'm not sure about the candle wax. So.
Say, Carol.
Yes, Haji.
Could you spell the name of that rice paper?
Yes, it's kinwashi. It's KINWASHI.
We have one other question. Is it possible to, or can you use
can't
parchment
make this
paper
folder.
instead of wax paper on the back side of your rice paper?
Instead of the wax paper?
Yeah.
You know,
parchment instead of
yes, I've
wax.
heard freezer paper or parchment paper. The reason I like the wax paper is because when you are applying your wax and you have your black construction paper underneath, it's easier to see through the wax paper, so you can better manage where your wax is going. Otherwise, with some of those other more opaque, like your parchment or your freezer paper, it's too opaque. It's hard to really, it kind of makes it hard to see in the rice paper what you're actually doing at times. Anything else? All right, so let's get started here. All right, so this is the painting that I'm going to show you the steps for tonight is this one. Now, I don't know if I need to put stuff here for people to, I'm trying to get this so it looks straight here. I don't do very well. Okay, so this is the painting, just if this helps. So this is the painting I'm going to show the steps on. It's a flamingo. I've been having a lot of fun with flamingo. I did do a pelican painting a while back that sold. So this is when I'll show you the steps. The first thing that I do is I determine my design. So it is based on a flamingo photo I took at the Minnesota Zoo. So I put together my drawing. How do I get this so that it looks more straight? Like that, I guess. So this was my design. I had the flamingo. And then I added the leaves and things to just help with the design. So I don't know if that helps to hold it up here. This is an enlargement of my drawing. The other thing that I do is I actually make a value study. This is kind of, I'm sorry, this is small. Is there a way to enlarge this at all on the screen? There we go. So sorry, it's a little bit small there. So I do a value study. And the reason I do a value study is because a lot of the logic behind a batik is that for each wax application that you do, off saving your light values. Next, you start saving out your medium values, next your dark values. So it's all about value. So this is my value study. And most of the flamingo is my light value, except for some dark value. Got some really darkest value leaves, and then I've got some medium value, and then some light value again down here. So this is what I refer to quite a bit as I'm doing the painting to make sure I'm getting my values right and putting them in the right place. Okay. All right, so the way you set this up on your board is sorry. I promise the rest is not going to be like that. It's going to be the same size. Okay. This is really bothering me that it looks crooked up there. Okay. Okay. So this is my drawing that I put using the archival pen that I put on my rice paper. I do the drawing on the smooth side. So I trace it onto the smooth side. Now you just have to remember when you do that, the recommendation if you want a lot of texture in your painting is to paint on the rough side. So when you do the drawing and then you flip it to start painting on the rough side, it's going to be the reverse of what your drawing was when you drew it on there. So just remember that. So this is my drawing, and I did use the thicker archival pen to put the drawing up here. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to see. 8. I used an 8 instead of a 1. If I use the 1, it makes it very, very, very small. So the first thing that I do, I talked about the fact that the wax is used to save your values. So the first wax is going to be saving my whites on my painting. So I just go ahead and dip my brush in. And the brushes initially are hard because they have wax in them, but once you put them in the melted wax, they're going to soften up. I'm just going to show you what it looks like when you're putting your wax in there. The other thing I also do is I have a little map that I put together on a drawing to show me for each phase where I want to put my wax. Otherwise, sometimes you can get kind of lost in where I want to put my wax. So what I'm going to do here is the wax. I know that the head of the flamingo is where I want a lot of focus. And so the head of the flamingo is predominantly going to be, can you see what I'm doing? Waxed out. Now, one of the things you want to make sure of, and I've done this before, so just don't do this, is you have to make sure that your black construction paper is under your wax sheet. So having the black construction paper under the wax paper and under your drawing, it's easier to see where your wax is going on your rice paper. If I took this black sheet away, you can hardly see where I'm putting the wax. So it keeps track of where your wax is being put. But again, I had one time put the construction paper right under my rice paper. Very difficult to pull the rice paper off of the black construction paper. And you can probably tear it pretty easy. So put the black construction paper under the wax paper. So I'm just going to go ahead and come in here and you'll see that where I'm putting the wax, whoops, I kind of went over that one, is where I'm putting the wax is darkening so that you can pretty much see where the wax is going, which is good. So this just shows you what it looks like when you're putting your wax on. Now I'm coming along by the eye here. And I'm just kind of being careful because I'm going to have a little spot there going around the eye. So that's the head that I've waxed there. And then other places that I'm going to wax is I want to put a little highlight. And I think I'm going to actually go with a little smaller brush here. Going to put a little highlight on the beak there. And then where the kind of the line is for the mouth. Now, some of this things here you'll see later. If I need to on the final, I can use one of my archival pens to kind of clean that up a little bit because it's such small, fine lines. So the other places I want to white out is a little bit, some white up on tops of the feathers here, a little bit on this side, because I'm kind of thinking, well, my light somewhat I want to consider is kind of coming from this way. Then I'm also going to, there's some rocks down here, white rocks, so I white those out. So again, anything I want to save the white, I just wax out on this first waxing. And there's very little actually that I'm waxing out on the whites. So that just gives you an example of the first wax that I do. And you know, you can pretty much take it off pretty easily from the wax paper there. Okay. Any questions on that first? That was a very small wax. Eventually, your whole page is going to be waxed, just so you know. So then after I had done that one, this will show you, I had gone and done the waxes of the light colors of wax. And I came in and I did my light values of color. So my next wax is going to be, what of these light values do I actually want to save for when I'm doing my medium value paints? So the wax is almost acting a little bit like masking fluid if you've ever used masking fluid on a painting. Now, when you're actually painting the colors, you want to take the black construction paper out from under the wax paper, because otherwise it's very difficult to see what your colors are actually going to be. So, you know, because when you put it in here, it's going to skew what your color is going to be. And I always have the wax paper underneath. The rough side, painting on the rough side. Yes, you can paint on the smooth side when you're on the final step and you're trying to get some of the texture in there by adding paint in the little texture pieces on the rice paper. It's easier to do it if you're on the rough side painting instead of the smooth, but you can paint on either side. All right, so you'll see then that where I had waxed out the white, the color did not cover. So let's see here. Making sure I'm not missing anything here. Oh, okay. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wax out where I want the light values to be saved. So I'm going to wax out all of the flamingo's neck here because I know that I want that to be light value. So I just come in here. Now I do not have to go back over the areas that I already waxed. Oh, and again, I forgot the black construction paper. Because as I'm doing this, I'm like, oh, I can hardly see where my wax is going. So I'm just going to go ahead. Now I'm going to save a little bit right here in the shadow area of the neck because I'm going to put a medium value there. Now, sometimes you'll see that where I'm putting the wax, you'll see it changing where, you know, it gets darker. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily change. It still looks pretty light, but there is actually wax there. If you're not sure you have wax there, you can always kind of feel and just see if there's wax there. So that's one of the light values I'm going to save. I'm also going to save a couple pieces on these little leaves here up at the top. These are my medium value leaves, but because this particular tip of this leaf is going to actually hit a very dark leaf, I'm thinking a little bit about where are some of my values, my light values going to hit my dark values, and I want to have a little bit more contrast there. So I'm going to go ahead and just wax that out there. I'm going to wax the veins that are in my leaves here. So you can see again that wherever I'm putting the wax, it's changing to be darker. So I know that that's where I've got some wax there. Okay, so I'm just kind of looking here a little bit. Some of the places that that I put the light values kind of all over, even though it's not necessarily a light value. Some of the things are going to be darker value, but it doesn't matter because it's going to be, I'm going to put a darker value over there. The other thing I'm going to wax is these little fan-like leaves. So I just come in. And so I just want to show you, the reason I'm kind of showing you this wax process here of waxing these areas is because it's really easy when you have your melted wax to actually come in here and wax these areas out. Just like painting. Now I'm being very careful around the flamingo leg, because if I would accidentally wax over that flamingo leg, it would look like the flamingo's been amputated, the leg's been amputated, because once you put the wax down, it's very difficult to get it off the rice paper and it's going to repel your paint. Hi. That's paint. Yes, yes. So what I had done is I had originally waxed out my whites on the rice paper, and then I came in and I painted my light value color. And I didn't demo that. I wanted to be conscious of everyone's time, so I've got things already done in advance. So that was painting there. Watercolor, just regular watercolor. Good to see you here, Andrea. Okay. So I don't need to, go through and do all of this, but this gives you the idea of what I'm doing, in that I'm going through and I've saved the whites, and now I'm going through and waxing to save anywhere that I have my light valued colors. So I think what I'm going to do is I'll just move on to the next step here. And again, it's pretty easy to take it off of the wax. Not so much if you forget and you put it on the black construction paper. And you can use the same wax paper. You don't have to replace your wax paper for each of the steps. Right, so now what I've done again is I have gone ahead and this is where I've waxed out all my light values. So I did this leaf, you saw me starting this one, I done the neck up here and everything. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint some medium values, because I have the white saved and my light value saved. So this is where I think it gets kind of fun. And I don't know about other people, but I really struggle with values. So I really worked really hard on some of my paintings to try and really beef up my values. Before, my paintings were pretty pretty light all over. Now, the other thing I do, and I don't know how many people do this, if I can see what I did with them, is I always have scratch papers of watercolor paper, so I can see, okay, is my color what I want it to be? So this one looks pretty good for a medium value. So I'm going to go ahead and put it on. Thing I kind of like about after I've already waxed out some of the areas is that when I come in here with a pretty good sized brush and put my medium value in here, I don't have to be really careful around some of these shapes here where I've already waxed. I don't have to worry about going over into it because the wax protects it. So it just, I can be a little freer in when I'm putting the color on here. I'm coming in and just putting my color in. So you'll see here, I've waxed out that light value there. So the volume is not going there. Now I could go right over this pelican's beak, and the reason is because that's going to be black anyway. So don't have to worry about it. So I basically just come in, whoops, and do my painting of the values here. Now, some of these are going to end up being even darker values, because what I'm going to do after I get my medium values in here is I'm going to come in and wax again, and then I'm going to put my dark values in. So one of the things I wanted to show you, and this is something I'm still working on, because I'd really like to get to the point where I have more soft transition areas in my batik paintings, is if I don't want a hard edge up to where the wax is, what I can do is I can take and I can wet that. And then I take a Kleenex and I blot. Oops, lost my brush there. And so what that'll do is that'll hopefully help with a little bit more of a smooth transition, rather than just a really, all the same value of your color there. And because I have a shadow area, I could even come in a little bit with even a little bit of blue in here. The same with spots in here. And again, here I could do the same thing. I could just try and blot this. The other thing I wanted to let you know too is that you really need to understand the colors that you're using and their spread rate on your paper. Because on rice paper, when you're painting with watercolor, certain colors will really go fast on the rice paper, even more so than on watercolor paper. So whenever I'm putting a red on here, it really wants to go fast. So when I put painted my lighter values, I literally started my lighter values of this pink in the middle of the flamingo and watched the color literally spread out. And then I just kind of moved it to the edges. If I tried to go right up to the edges, you'd have pink. Whoops. You'd have pink all over out in your white area, because the color just spreads. And you'll even see, like right here where I've gotten some medium in there, it actually has spread right outside of where I actually put it. So when it's still wet, you can kind of, again, use a Kleenex, wet it, try and pick it up as much as you can. But you really have to think about the spreading rate of your color. So that's some in the flamingo. I'm not going to do all of it because I actually have another phase of this, but I wanted to show you, if I go in and I do my medium value of leaves, you kind of can do like you do already you do even on watercolor paper. You can come in and I can take some yellow here, put it kind of up there by, where I want a little yellow in there. Then I can bring my green in and just kind of let it mingle on its own. Again, my green wants to spread. So, and I think on one of the leaves, I even brought in a little bit of the color I'm using for the flamingo there. So you can just, you can kind of play a little bit with the colors and let them mingle a little bit as you're painting. So I'm not gonna paint all of these. I'm gonna show you the next phase here. Oh, and also, I could come in and do some, more blue down here, but I'm gonna go ahead and just show you after I've done my medium values, what it looks like.
Are there any questions right now?
Thank you.
Well, Carol's setting up. Could I ask if there's Mary Axelson in the audience?
All right. So what I did next, like I was talking about before, okay, I had gone in and I was doing my medium values. So I painted a medium value here. I painted some medium values here. I've got my medium values in here that I painted. And so then what I can do, and I'm going to put my black paper under here. Is because my medium values, some of them are, they're waxed. Again, white medium values are waxed. I can come in and start doing some dark values. The other thing I did here, so these are steps I did outside of the demo here, is that after putting in my medium values and waxing them out, I came in and did my background of blue. And the reason I did the background then instead of when I was doing my light values initially is because I can control a little bit more the background, not moving into the leaves and some things I don't want it to move into and vice versa. So that's why I came in and did the blue now. And then what I did is I waxed out also all the blue, all the background. And that really makes it easy. Get that under the wax paper there. That really makes it easy then for me to come in, and when I'm doing my dark values, especially in the leaves, I don't have to worry about my leaf dark value going off into the background because the wax is protecting it. So I kind of think about ways to better control the painting. So now I'm going to put in some of the dark values, and this is really fun when you go start putting in the dark values, and you'll see why. And so for some of the dark values, I'm using some indigo blue with some of the pink that I'm using for the flamingo. Again, I'm going to kind of use my scrap paper here and just see, okay, does that look like it's a good dark value that I want to use in the right color? So any place I have waxed, my dark value is not gonna go. So I'm just gonna come in here. Oh, and the other thing too, usually I have my wax on the other side. I have taken my paintbrush and dipped it into my melted wax. You don't want to do that. Likewise, I've taken the wax brush and put it in my water. So usually you want to make sure your wax, melted wax is far away from your water and your paint. Okay, so now see how when I come in here, and now because a lot of it's waxed, I feel like I can be pretty free about coming in here and with this color. Again, this is going to be black, the beak, so I can go over that. But, it's only in a few places that it's taking on the flamingo, because most of the flamingo is waxed out. But this is sometimes when I start getting really excited because I like the I guess you'd almost call it, oh, and again, I should take this out so you can actually see better the color. The reason I like the batik is because I like the fact that it has texture, and I also like sometimes you get kind of this silk screeny kind of look to it, and I like that. All right. And again, usually I have a little a drawing where I have notes letting me know where I am in the painting in case I get lost. So where should my dark values be? What am I painting now? So now I'm going to come in and I am going to do some dark green, because here's where some of my, again, I'm putting in my darkest values. So I want to come in with some dark green. Wherever I have waxed out on this leaf, it is not taking. The color will go right over. Now I'm not bringing the green all the way to the edge of the leaf. Well, actually, I forgot that I have waxed that's the background, so that's fine. I can come out here because it won't go any further. Same thing with the medium values. If I feel like I'm looking at this and I'm like, well, yes, it's a dark value there, but I actually want to have, I want to have some softer areas in here. You can take a Kleenex and you just absorb some of the paint where you don't want it to be so dark. You want to have it a little different. So like here where it's coming up into the light area of the leaf that I've already waxed out, I want to soften that. So what I do is I take my Kleenex and I try and make it a little bit more of a soft transition there. So it's kind of fun where you see where this, like here's where I had the light value there for that leaf that I wanted to save. So it's fun. I can bring the dark right up to it. And I don't have to worry about it going over there. So I'm just kind of being conscious of time here. And when you dab the color with the Kleenex, sometimes you have to go back even a couple minutes later and dab it again because the color will keep kind of creeping and you'll lose your softness that you're trying to get there. No, just do another one just for the heck of it here. So this is another dark one here. And again, kind of fun because I can just come right across this other leaf here and it won't take over there because I've waxed it out. And here again on the top of this leaf, I don't want that hard line there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, put some water here, and I'm going to dab it with the Kleenex to kind of make that more of a soft transition there. And I'm not going to do everything here, but I'll just show you a little bit. Whoops, got that a little bit too dark. you know, I can come in down here at the bottom where I waxed out some things and go ahead and put some color in there. And then wherever the wax is, the color won't hold. And you'll see it beading up where I've got the wax. Same thing, if I wanted to dab a little bit here, I could. Any questions so far on this part where I'm putting in the dark? You're going to take it off, and there's another, that one of the final steps is kind of fun. You'll see there's another reason for the wax besides, but you're right, it's being like a mask. And then it also gives some texture, another one of the final steps, so you use it that way. So, but you're exactly right. So eventually this painting will be totally full of wax. All right, so there's that one. I'm not going to finish all of it there. Okay, for the next one here. Okay, so we're already close to a final step, and that's good because I'm just going to be right on time. All right. So, actually first I'll take that up there. Here is, again, I've done this outside of the demo. You saw me, just to repeat the steps, waxed out the white, did the light values, waxed out the light values, did the medium values, waxed out the medium values, did the dark values. So my leaves, my dark value leaves are all done. At this point then, this is where everyone needs to watch, because this you're going to miss it if you don't watch. This is where it's kind of a fun thing. You take your painting, and first of all, you have to have some paper here because it gets messy. You take your painting and you do this with it. Now you play basketball and, you know, but no, what you do is you crinkle it, kind of work it a little bit, because what you're doing is you're cracking the wax. Because that is how then you end up with some of your texture. And I just kind of make sure I really kind of work it a little bit. And you'll see that there's wax dropping off, which is why you want a paper underneath, because you end up with a little bit of wax coming off. So then you flatten it out again. And you don't want to, let me get rid of this one with all of the wax there. Get my wax paper down again. Oh, and I don't need the black there yet. So you flatten it out. You don't necessarily want to come in and brush off any wax. You just want to leave it the way it is with the cracks in it. Because if you brush off some of the wax, what could possibly happen is you might end up with a big blob wherever you've gotten rid of your wax there. Okay, so I'm going to put my paintbrush over there so that I'm using my wax brush, and I'm actually I want to use this one, sorry. Okay, so now what you're going to do is you're going to go in and you're going to put color in places where you want to have some of the texture come out. So if, let's see where, so if you look at the final painting here, you'll see where there's texture in these areas. That texture is coming from the process that I'm going to be doing right now. So you bring it over And this part of the process, what I do is I have separate containers with the paint that I want to use in this part of the process. The reason is because you end up with so much wax in your brush and in your palette if you don't have a separate container in this part of the process. So I tend to do that. So I've got my pink for the flamingo. I've got the green. I've got the blue. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to, for the, you could take and put all one color on this, or you can do separate colors. But what you're doing is you're taking a color and you're working it into the creases of where you have cracked the wax. And that's what gives you the texture. You want it to be usually a dark value. I've decided that I'm going to want to put blue where the blue is, you know, the kind of pinkish color where the flamingo is, and a dark green down here. I'm not going to do a black all over or blue all over. I'm going to kind of put the colors where I want it. So I'm going to take the blue first. And I'm just making it kind of a darker blue. Another thing I wanted to mention is for this part of the process, I actually find that using not a watercolor brush, but a stiffer brush helps more because you can get it more into the cracks where the wax is. So if I've mixed my color, I just come in here and start putting my color in. And you can decide where you want to put it. I'm not going to put much down here for texture because I've already got a lot of activity going on down here in the composition. And I want your attention to be more up by the head of the flamingo. So, and one thing that I think I might have just noticed is trying to just make sure if I'm painting on the, yep, on the right side where, and I think this is actually the side that I want right here, because this is the right. So that's another thing is that you need to make sure you're on the right side. Doesn't hurt to put it on the other side, but you're not going to get the same texture results. So you kind of try and work it in. The more that you work it in, the more you're going to have some texture coming out. And the reason I want to try even some other rice papers besides this one is some of the rice papers that you can get are very have more texture even than this does, like more veins in it, I guess you'd say. So I will just put a little bit in a couple other places here, but that's that. Okay. So it's a cobalt blue mixed with some indigo. I really like indigo a lot to help darken some blues and stuff. And the color that I'm using for the flamingo, I always have to look at it and I can never pronounce it. It's quinidone rose. I never say it. Yeah, Quinn. Okay, Quinn Rose. All right. And so then, and I am actually using my palette here more than I wanted to. Because again, you get a lot of wax in this brush when you're when you're trying to force it into the wax here on this part of the process, you do end up with a lot of wax in your brush. So again, I'm coming in here and I'm going to put some in the pellic there, the flamingo. And trying to make it a dark value so that it's going to show up. Yeah. And then I also go in and do some green. And I'm kind of randomly going through here and doing this, but you know, you might have a design where you want to be you really want to think about where you're putting it. And I am doing it a little bit here. Like I'm thinking where I want most of the texture for the flamingo is in some of the areas where there's shadow. You know, again, I want some up by the head of the flamingo because that's where I want focus of attention to be. I am coming down and putting some in the leaves because I think it's kind of fun to see the texture in the leaves. So that's what you do to get your texture. So once you've done, you've put your, squiggle the paint in wherever you wanted to in your cracked piece of your painting. Then, and this is really a process, I know. Then what you do is you take this and you put it in between. Oh, no, one other thing. Forgot. Okay, you got to do one more wax. So after you squiggle the paint in there, then you're also going to come and you're going to take and do another wax over where you have put some of that color. And when I do large areas of wax, I'm just using like a regular paintbrush. I mean, like a house paintbrush. So I come in here, get the wax on my brush. And a lot of times when I put my brush in the liquid wax, I do kind of dab it on the side of the can here because I don't want to drip a big blob of wax when I'm coming across. But I come here and I just put the wax over where I have put some of those, mostly where I put all those little blobs. So I don't have to go over and wax the whole thing. I'm pretty much just waxing where I've added color. I think what it does, that's a very good question. Did everyone hear it on? So the question was, if you're going to take the wax off, why do you put wax on that additional color that you put on here? I think the reason is because it helps kind of seal that color, and it helps to, when you go to the next step, it helps to seal the color and make sure the color stays on the painting, and it will possibly even spread. So the next step on this is that, I'll just show you the next step, which might explain it more, is that you take your painting and you put it in between a big pad of newspaper and you iron it. And so when you iron it, the wax melts off. And I think to your question, when you put the final wax on some of the places you've added that color, when you put the heat on it, it works to, when you're ironing it, because you've got the wax on it, it works to kind of spread that color and keep the color in your painting. Yeah, you can do it either way. I've done it both ways, and it, I don't really get a lot of blobs of color, I guess. It kind of depends on, when I put the wax on here, I don't want to smear it a lot. I'm just kind of gently putting the wax over it. But yes, if you wanted to wait for the paint to dry, but after you put it into the cracked areas, before you do the wax over that, you could certainly do that. Yeah, Andrea. Nope, good question. So the question was, when you iron in the newspaper, does the wax spread out evenly on the painting, or kind of what happens? I think that I get a question. Or does it get absorbed in the newspaper? So what happens is that your color will stay in your rice paper and the wax is what melts off. And this is what your the paper looks like when you first, I don't know if I need it there, but this is what it looks like when you first iron it. I mean, you get a lot of wax off of the painting. And so you need to make sure you have a good cushion of newspaper when you're doing your first iron and getting the wax off, because a lot of wax comes off. And then as you continue to iron it, you can do less and less sheets of paper, because most of the wax is coming off. You keep ironing it between newspaper until there's no more wax left, like you can't see any more wax coming off on the newspaper. Yes. I haven't had that happen. So the question was if any of the ink from the newspaper comes off and contaminates the painting, and I have not had that happen. Yes. Yes. So you start off with I start off with this, and once I feel like the newspaper has gotten so much wax has coming off on the newspaper, then what I'll do is, and it can't absorb anymore, I'll get another bunch of newspaper, put it in between, iron again, and just continue doing that until I no longer see any wax coming off on the newspaper. And so then once you do all that, then that is how you end up. That's how you end up then with the final piece. Oh, there we go. And so, oh, and what I didn't show you too is that you can do a deckled edge. Now this one I did not do a deckled edge. I just cut the edges. A deckled edge is where you actually tear the paper. Like this is where I did a deckled edge. Let's see if we can show it more on here. Where you tear the rice paper around the edges. And the way that you do that, if you want a deckled edge, this rough edge, you need to do that before you start painting, because otherwise it's very difficult to get the rice paper to want to tear. You just draw a line where you want it to tear it, and then you take a brush with water and you wet the rice paper up to the line that you've drawn. And then what you do is you just tear very gently along that line, and the rice paper will tear up to where you have the paper wet. But you have to do that before you start painting, otherwise you won't be able to do that. And so for mounting these, is that right for you guys? For mounting these, what I do is I use an archival mounting double side tape, kind of like the same things you could use for scrapbooking. And just put, a little bit on each corner, and that kind of takes care of it. You can, do a mat that actually comes right up to your painting. You could do a mat. I tend to like to actually have the mat not actually come right up to the painting. I really like it when you have kind of, some edges showing. So is that upside down for you guys? Okay. The other thing is signature. I do put my signatures on. Usually I forget to put it on ahead of time. You really have to kind of work a little bit to get your signature on the painting once it's painted, but usually I can get it on with one of the archival pens. Any questions? Yep. Oh, on just my blue background. Yep. So what I did when I put the blue background, I did the same thing I did in some of the other areas where I wanted some soft areas and I wanted some, deeper or darker areas. I used a Kleenex and kind of really just patted it to try and get some of the paint up a little bit. And when I did the background, it was easy for me to do a pretty good paint of the background because a lot of this I already had waxed. So I didn't have to worry about going, the edges of my shapes that the background would go into that. So. Oh, so what I did is on my original, on my other. So I actually had a pencil line on all of my, when I was working on these, I had a pencil line. Just, maybe can't see it a lot, but so I just knew that's where I wanted to cut once I was done. So. And again, one of the things I do is I just keep notes all through the process to just make sure I don't forget where I'm at. Because especially when you get it totally waxed, it's really easy to forget where you are. So any other questions? You don't have to clean the wax out of the brush, your wax brushes. All you need to do, for your watercolor brushes that you use when you're putting the watercolor on, the little bit of wax in there, I still just rinse them in water. The brushes you use in your melted wax, you don't have to get the wax out because every time you put it into the melted wax again, it just softens up, and so you don't need to worry about cleaning them. Yeah. So this one was 4 times. And each time you're using less newspaper. And I should repeat. So the other question was how many times you usually have to iron it before you're done getting all the wax off, and about 4 times. And the temperature is usually you don't use steam. You just have it on like a cotton setting and just iron it that way. And use an old iron. So, yes. What's this again now? I'm sorry. Okay, so the question was, have I ever used liquid watercolor because it's more concentrated to use for the last bit of watercolor I put on? I have not tried that yet. No, I haven't. Some good thoughts though of things to try. Other questions? And it hasn't, yes, go ahead. I do it on an ironing board. However, Kathy George, who I was talking about that first introduced me to this, she does large batik paintings. And so I'm thinking that she probably uses some kind of a board, to iron on rather than an ironing board. But mine are relatively small. They can still fit on the ironing board. So good questions. Any other questions?
Well, thank you, Carol. Thank you for the whole
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you.